There are all kinds of videos on YouTube that are think pieces about Bethesda, criticism videos about Bethesda. You know, pretty much anybody with a YouTube channel has made a 25-minute video ranting about Bethesda and their fall from grace and how they're, not what they used to be. They've fallen behind the times. They're disappointing, this, that, and the other. And it's all true, sadly. And the worst part about it is it doesn't seem like they're listening to any of it. From the series of poor and disappointing video game launches from Bethesda over the last few years, specifically Bethesda Game Studios. Bethesda still put out some other good stuff, but Bethesda Game Studios is really what we're talking about here. So from those poor and disappointing launches from Bethesda Game Studios to the developers arguing with fans online about criticisms and straight up ignoring criticisms, from Todd Howard going on to interviews and completely dodging questions that have anything to do with the criticism that Starfield received when it came out, and kind of just seeming super out of touch with how fans actually feel about the game. And speaking of out of touch, just statements from Bethesda Game Studios lead writer Emil Pagliarulo about how all these different things that he's talked about with writing and addressing fan criticism and just the stuff that he said that's just so out of touch. And then obviously with BGS games just being so outdated at this point and being so far behind their competitors in every single way, it's really frustrating being a Bethesda Game Studios fan, especially when you're waiting for these releases that seem like they're never going to come. Honestly, I can only fear for Elder Scrolls 6 after everything we've witnessed. That went from being my most hyped game of all time after Skyrim to, me being really worried about what it may end up being. Skyrim is my favorite game ever. Thousands of hours in it. I've been excited for Elder Scrolls 6 for years. It's been 14 years since Skyrim came out, and it's been 7 years since the Elder Scrolls 6 teaser trailer was shown at E3. It's been 7 years since that happened. The hype I felt watching that trailer was unlike anything else. And it's been 7 years now, and now I just look at that trailer, I'm like, they showed a animated going over some blank landscape and then threw the title card up there, and we were all hyped thinking that maybe we would learn something about it. We have not learned one single thing about the Elder Scrolls 6 in 7 years. Not one thing. At this point, it's downright unacceptable that it's taking this long, and I don't understand it. I mean, at the very least, maybe just talk about it a little bit, give fans something to latch onto. I will say something that does generate some sort of hype for me is the rumored Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion remake. But even that has seen zero official acknowledgement from Bethesda. The only thing we know is, stuff that came out from leaks and things that they were forced to release during the FTC hearings back in 2020 or something. They were forced to show their game release schedule. And even that document alone shows how completely out of touch Bethesda is just in general. Even from the predictions that they were making on that FTC document, both from predicted release dates to predicted, financial income from these games. They're just so insanely out of touch with reality, and it's absolutely insane. On that document, Bethesda predicted Redfall, which was an absolute catastrophe of a game release. I think the support got pulled for it. I don't think that it's even being supported anymore. I could be wrong on that, but that was a game that people were kind of excited for, and it ended up flopping really bad and not being that good. They predicted that game would make them $150 million in revenue. I mean, just so completely out of touch with the reality. It didn't even come remotely close to that. On that FTC document, the Oblivion remake, it was called a remaster on the document. Now all the leaks are saying that it's going to be a full-blown remake, but on that document, it said that it was slated to release in 2022. So the Oblivion remake was supposed to come out in 2022, and it's 2025, and we still haven't seen anything about it. Now the rumor is it's supposed to come out this year, but again, we still haven't seen anything official from Bethesda from it. On that same FTC document also, Elder Scrolls 6 was apparently slated to come out in 2024, and now it's looking like we probably won't get it until at the soonest 2028, at the soonest. Looking at that 2024 release date is almost just hilarious to look at this point, because now it's 2025 and we haven't even gotten a crumb of information about that game. I mean, absolutely nothing. There haven't even been leaks about it. Usually there's leaks. Like when Starfield was being developed and stuff, there were all kinds of leaks coming out about that game. Elder Scrolls 6 has, credit to Bethesda for keeping things airtight during the Elder Scrolls 6 development. But honestly, at this point, if I'm Bethesda, I'd be like, you know what? Y'all go ahead and leak something. Give them something to look at, something to care about. Because as the more time that goes on, the less people are going to care. As strong as the Elder Scrolls brand is, the less people are going to care, the more you go, the more time they have to forget that it's a thing, the less people are going to care. On the FTC document, they predicted Elder Scrolls 6 to make them $1 billion, and that was probably like semi-realistic after the hype of Skyrim. $1 billion game in Elder Scrolls 6. In terms of the hype around that game, that was probably semi-realistic, but now, with all of these, failed releases, all the disappointment that fans have felt about Bethesda's games over the last however many years, plus add on to the fact that it's been 14 years since the last Elder Scrolls game, it's been 7 years since the trailer for Elder Scrolls 6, and we haven't gotten a single crumb of information, I find it really hard to believe that people are going to care enough to generate them $1 billion in revenue for Elder Scrolls 6. Now, if they blow it out of the water and it ends up being somehow better than Skyrim, which at this point seems pretty unlikely, then I'll, eat my words. But right now, predicting that game to make you $1 billion is kind of crazy. Obviously, Starfield ended up being a pretty big disappointment. Again, that's another thing that's just been talked about ad nauseum all over YouTube. Like, everybody has an opinion about Starfield. You've got the people... I even made a video about Starfield talking about how I was disappointed in it, and a lot of the comments were like, oh, wow, the same exact video that every other YouTuber has ever made about hating on Starfield. You just want money, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I get why people feel that way, because everybody has made a video about how Starfield was disappointing, and I enjoyed the game to a point. I really did. I don't think it's like inherently a bad video game, but it just doesn't live up to what we thought it was going to be, and it doesn't live up to what Bethesda Game Studios has made in the past. It's not even debatable that the game prioritized quantity over quality with Starfield. There are thousands of planets, but they all lack substance. There's nothing to do on these planets. They're empty. They're lifeless. You've got procedurally generated landscapes. You've got, procedurally generated dungeons and outposts and stuff. It's all the same thing on every planet. There's no variety to it. There's no incentive to explore. There's no reason to say, hey, look at this planet right here. This looks kind of cool. I wonder if I can find something cool on there. There's nothing cool on there. There's nothing on there at all. You're just going to run around and do nothing pretty much. The shallow quest writing, the lack of, real choice and consequence. It doesn't even feel like Starfield's really an RPG the way that, games in the past like Fallout 3 and Oblivion and even Skyrim, so people criticize Skyrim for its lack of choice and consequence, really, but it still had significantly more, in my opinion, than Starfield did. So, and that's been the problem with like modern day RPGs in general, is they don't have that feeling. They don't have that choice and consequence. They water everything down and they make everything really easy and approachable, and there's no consequences for your actions and no consequences for your choices. And, at this point, there's really no excuse for that. Their games, they're refusing to get with the times. They make their games feel dated with all these loading screens. You've got games like The Witcher 3, which came out in 2015, and you can enter caves and dungeons seamlessly without loading screens. You can go in and out of all these buildings in every town and every village and every city, and your character just opens the door and you walk in and it's seamless and there's no loading screen. Bethesda, at this point in 2025, has not figured out how to do that, and it's mostly in part to their engine, which they also refuse to upgrade, optimize, or straight up move off of in general. Apparently, the Oblivion remake is being made in Unreal Engine 5, and it's instead of the engine that they're using right now, and for like their main releases, and it's like, why? Why are you still sticking to this outdated engine? I don't understand. Games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which was made by a non-AAA studio that had to get their start through a Kickstarter campaign, and they've only made their second game ever. KCD2 was their second video game release ever. They have unbelievably less funding than like Bethesda does. Like, it's not even... I think the budget for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was $40 million, whereas like the budget for Elder Scrolls 6 is probably $500 million, probably, maybe more. It's so, I don't know. It pretty much, KCD2 took the Elder Scrolls formula and made it deeper, better written, more choice and consequence, a better world, better looking, more advanced mechanics, like the whole 9 yards. And for a team with so much less experience, so much less funding, so much less everything, that's really pathetic to think about. There's when you really truly think about it, there is absolutely zero excuse for this stuff to be happening. And again, circling back to Elder Scrolls 6, Bethesda has announced that that game is being made in the same engine that Starfield was made in. So we can go ahead and expect the game to look, feel, and operate pretty much exactly like Starfield did in terms of moving around, in terms of interacting with NPCs, in terms of combat, in terms of stuff like that, in terms of ragdoll physics, all the loading screens, that type of stuff is what we're going to be dealing with Elder Scrolls 6 because of the engine that they have limited themselves to. You can expect those loading screens when you enter a building, when you exit a building, when you enter a dungeon, when you exit a dungeon. You're going to have to sit through loading screens. And it's just like, that was a big complaint about Starfield. It was a loading screen simulator. Again, games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Elden Ring, The Witcher 3, which came out 10 years ago, they don't have that problem. They have moved past that problem. And Bethesda hasn't. So again, if the Oblivion remake is to be believed, if that's actually happening, it's rumored to be made in Unreal Engine 5, meaning that the graphical upgrade will be extremely noticeable for sure. And we may even see that ability to enter and exit, areas. Imagine they release Oblivion remake, and in the Elder Scrolls 4, now you can enter and exit buildings with no loading screens because it's in this Unreal Engine, and you can do all this stuff without loading screens. You can seamlessly go in and out of dungeons without loading screens in the Elder Scrolls 4 remake, but then when the Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, that won't be the case, and you can't do that. That's honestly just crazy to think about, that this older game that they remade and remastered for modern times will be able to do the things that the brand new main entry that's been hyped up for the last 14 years isn't going to have that capability. Of all the current Bethesda projects that are going on, I would say this Oblivion remake is the one that I'm most optimistic about and maybe the most excited about. Obviously, my hype for Elder Scrolls 6 is still very high just because of how much I love Skyrim and how much I want to continue living in that world and playing in that world, but Oblivion was a game I always wanted to fully play through. I've played a good bit of it over the years. I've started and stopped it here and there, and I think it's an amazing game, but it is held back, I think, by how outdated it feels. So I am very excited for this Oblivion remake. I do think it is a little bit messed up how they saw that there was a fan-made project with Skyblivion and Skywind, which is just fan-made, pretty much modders, for working for free over the last 10 plus years, have been working on remastering Oblivion in the Skyrim engine, just copying over all the voice files, remaking the dungeons, just enhanced graphics, everything. It's literally Oblivion in the Skyrim engine with Skyrim graphics and Skyrim everything, and they've been working on that forever for free. And so Bethesda saw how much money they could possibly make off of that. They saw how popular it was, and they were just like, oh, you know what? We're going to make our own now. So I do think that's a little bit messed up. Obviously makes sense from a business perspective. I still think that plenty of people will download and play Skyblivion when it's released by the fans who have made it, because number one, it'll be free, and number two, probably just to stick it to Bethesda. But imagine how embarrassing it would be if that Skyblivion, if the fan-made re-release of Oblivion ends up being better, ends up being higher quality than the official Bethesda released Oblivion remake. That would be absolutely embarrassing for them, and would probably just kill 99% of the hype people would have for Elder Scrolls 6. But still, I'm hoping and praying that they handle this correctly, release a faithful and true upgrade for Oblivion, because I think that's an incredible game that, if it felt more modernized, it would sell like crazy, and way more people would be able to experience that game that haven't experienced it before. And I'm going to make a full video actually about the Oblivion remake. That'll either be my next video or one of my next couple videos, but I'm gonna make a full-blown video talking about that and what to expect and what I hope it looks like. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested. But yeah, I for one am extremely tired of Bethesda and Todd Howard's inability to address fan criticisms. Anytime they address anything, they water down the complaints, and they don't seem to fully grasp what's really going on within their fan base. They seem blissfully ignorant of how people actually feel about Starfield, about how people actually feel about all these other things that they've done over the last however many years. They don't seem to realize or accept that the way they make their games is outdated, and that other games and other game studios have upped the ante. They have raised the bar when it comes to open world fantasy RPGs. When you look at Baldur's Gate 3, when you look at The Witcher 3, when you look at Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, when you look at all of these really high quality, well reviewed single player RPGs, Cyberpunk 2077, like all of these games have raised the bar for the genre. So when Bethesda released Starfield and they're like, look how cool this is. It's like, yeah, if that had come out in 2011, absolutely. People would have lost their mind over Starfield. But the industry and the open world RPG genre in general has moved so far ahead of what Bethesda has been putting out lately. And it's like they don't seem to grasp that. They don't seem to understand that. I don't know how you can look at the rest of the games industry, look at games like Baldur's Gate 3 and The Witcher 3 and, KCD 2. I don't know how you look at those games and go, what we're doing is on par with that. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, how blissfully ignorant could you possibly be? Skyrim is one of the most successful, best-selling video games of all time. Now, the best-selling part, obviously it sold a lot in general because it was just a really good game and people loved it and it sold a lot. They've also re-released the game 14 times on every single console and platform, so that goes into kind of bloating the sales numbers a little bit, but 60 million copies of Skyrim have been sold since it came out. That game has made them ungodly amounts of money. And the reason for that is because people love the game. You can feel the passion that was poured into every crevice of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. That game feels like it was made with love. It feels like it was made with the players in mind. It feels like it was made with that charm and that magic and that attention to detail and that that commitment to creativity and to, exploration and to finding a cool weapon and finding cool loot and doing this and doing that and getting lost in the world and in the lore and everything. Like, everything was so fleshed out and so detailed and so well made in Skyrim. And that's why that game has aged so well. That's why I do a yearly playthrough of it. That's why so many people return to that game over and over and over again, because it's fantastic. You can feel the passion that was used when Skyrim was being made. It just has that magical feeling. Oblivion has the same feeling. It has that sense of charm, that sense of wonder, that sense of just magic that a Bethesda game hasn't had. Like, it started with Fallout 4. I didn't like Fallout 4 very much. Thought it was very disappointing. And then obviously we saw what happened with Fallout 76. We saw what happened with Starfield. Like, pretty much ever since Skyrim, it's like they just forgot. They lost their identity. They forgot, hey, this is why these games succeeded in the first place. Comparing that magical feeling of Skyrim to the sanitized, shallow feeling you get when you're playing Starfield, it's sad. It sucks. Skyrim is just so immersive, and all of their games prior to Skyrim feel that way. The Fallout games felt that way. And so, yeah, I don't know. It just sucks. I can promise you guys, if we waited almost 2 decades for the Elder Scrolls 6 to come out and it ends up being disappointing, or it ends up being a flop, or it ends up being shallow and poorly written and, outdated, Bethesda will lose every single solitary bit of goodwill that fans have left. It will all be gone. Every single bit of it. Because Elder Scrolls 6 is like that one thing that most Bethesda fans are sitting back. Anybody who's like disappointed with Bethesda or fed up with Bethesda, like I'm starting to get to that point. Anybody who is at that point really is like, okay, well, we'll just wait for Elder Scrolls 6. We'll see what Elder Scrolls 6 is like. Elder Scrolls 6 is their opportunity to bounce back. And maybe that's why it's taking so long. Maybe they realize like, oh, we might be completely cooked if we drop the ball on this one. So I don't know. I don't know what they need to do. I don't know what needs to change on the development side. And with Todd Howard went from being one of the most beloved figureheads in all of gaming to being just a meme and a joke. And you go watch an interview, and he chooses like the most PC, like the most friendly, the most like non-intrusive interviews where they're not allowed to ask any hard-hitting questions about why their games aren't doing too hot lately. And even still, when he's asked any sort of question about, hey, how do you feel about the fact that Starfield's pretty polarizing? Some people love it, some people hate it. He can't bring himself to admit that some people hate it. He's just like, some people love it, and then we found out that some people love it a little bit less. Like, nah, brother, people don't like it. There's people who don't like it. I don't hate it. I actually enjoyed the game to a point, but then, it's still easy to realize that it's just not up to par with their other games. And Starfield had so much potential. I mean, it was a open world Bethesda Game Studios style space RPG. Like, that sounds like a dream game, and it just fell short in so many ways that just is really disappointing. So if Elder Scrolls flops or is even remotely disappointing, all that goodwill that Bethesda has left, all that hope that fans still have for them is going to disappear. And then whenever they finally do release Fallout 5 in like 2042 or whenever it's going to be, I can pretty much guarantee that the hype going into that is going to be pretty much non-existent, because Fallout fans have been fed up with Bethesda for a while. A lot of people jumped off the Fallout train with Fallout 4. A lot of people felt like it was just, again, a washed down, sanitized, not as good version of Fallout. And then Fallout 76, we obviously saw what that catastrophe ended up being. They obviously, dedicated themselves to fixing the game and whatnot, but that's still, I don't know a single person who plays Fallout 76, so I don't know. And then obviously Starfield, so yeah, I don't know, but Fallout fans aren't too happy right now because of what they've done with the last couple Fallout entries. Elder Scrolls fans aren't happy right now because it's been 14 years since the last Elder Scrolls game, 7 years since the teaser trailer for Elder Scrolls 6, and so now your two mega franchises, because even with like not taking Bethesda Game Studios into account, if you take Bethesda as a company into account, Dishonored and Doom and all these other pretty big, pretty successful franchises they still don't compare to the Elder Scrolls and Fallout. The Elder Scrolls and Fallout are Bethesda's two biggest cash cows, and they have pissed off the fans of both of those franchises. So you can kind of get a little bit of that goodwill back with Elder Scrolls fans if you release the Oblivion remake and it ends up being really good and really fun, and you can introduce that game to a larger audience. I think that would be a really good marketing tool to get people more excited for Elder Scrolls 6. And then if you release Elder Scrolls 6 and it's a certified hood classic and it's a banger like it's supposed to be, then maybe they start to go back on the upward trajectory. Maybe after Elder Scrolls 6, they release Fallout 5 and it ends up being really good and faithful and people love it and it's awesome. And they get back on the good side of Fallout fans, and then maybe they release Starfield 2 in like 2055 when we're all about to have grandkids. But at that point, maybe they release Starfield 2 and it ends up capitalizing on the potential that Starfield has, because let's be honest, man, it has a lot of potential. If they do it right, it has a lot of potential. If they were to progress themselves properly, that franchise still has potential. It really does, because when you take a step back and you don't look at things from a biased perspective, Starfield's not a bad first entry for a new franchise. Like if the first Elder Scrolls game, if Arena was as good and as big as Starfield was, then, that would have been really good. So when you take the Bethesda Game Studios bias out of it, it's still, it's not a bad first entry for a new IP. So, I mean, Bethesda has it in their hands. You could be running with a great fantasy RPG series in the Elder Scrolls that everybody loves. You could have the great post-apocalyptic RPG series in Fallout, and then you could have a great sci-fi space RPG series with Starfield. Like, with those three IPs, you could be on the top of the gaming industry. You could make all of the money. Just do it right. It's so frustrating to look at Bethesda and see how they refuse to do stuff right. It sucks, man. It sucks. So anyway, this ended up being a really long ramble video, but I'm fed up with what we're witnessing from Bethesda right now. I'm just fed up with it, and I'm just they can get back on track. They have the ability to do so. So we'll just keep an eye on these next few releases. If you guys like this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more content. And, I tried out something new with the face cam today. I haven't done that before. Or actually, I did that, I think, with like a Call of Duty map tier list, like a couple years ago. But other than that, I haven't done anything with the face cam. So if you guys like this, let me know. Subscribe for more, leave a like, all that jazz. And, I'll see y'all on the next one.